2009, I was the founder and CMO of a nutritional, and kind of cut my teeth on a very fast growing startup. Right when social media was starting to come around for business purposes. Up till then, it was really mostly personal. So we were one of the first to put up a Facebook page in the industry, and it was for a pre-launch, which just blew doors. And so we knew we had something going on, and how social media was aligning with a lot of the aspects of how the channel works.
And for me, that's the interesting part, right? You rewind to 2009, and Facebook's so common now, right, with the billions of users and how it's used. But back then, it was almost wild, wild west, right? And so
Right.
you were the first to do it, and it really impacted the pre-launch. So talk us through a little bit about how you guys used Facebook and social media at that point, because we'll eventually talk about how it's changed. But let's talk a little bit about what you did there and the things that you learned, because that impacted kind of the pathway, the roadmap that you've taken with your career.
Yeah, the biggest challenge back then was getting people on Facebook. Not enough people it wasn't really hitting critical mass yet. And so, but that was like the first big social media that a lot of people were joining at the time. And it really wasn't being used for business, like I said. So ultimately capturing that and using it to sell, I guess, if you will, the idea of this pre-launch and connecting that to videos and, all the sizzle stuff that happened before that with funnels and websites. And so it's really basically moving what was already happening on the web over to social and building into that social network.
And that was the interesting part, right? Because so many people had used kind of the funnels or the landing pages to capture information. But what you guys did was different. It was the first beginning of building that hype, the excitement, which we've seen, social media go and do. And it created that exposure, right, to the masses. And so yep. I think you realized early on, what was going to happen with the industry. So you told me something interesting, kind of a prediction you made, right? That with your experience, with Facebook, you eventually moved over to a supplier side. But what was it that you found that you kind of, predicted, if you will, of how social media would influence the direct sales industry?
Sure. Well, I wasn't the only person that saw it coming, but I was definitely in the middle of it, having worked to my own firm, built my own firm to do the social media consulting for direct sellers, right? So I saw where things were going. We knew that people were moving online and kind of still doing some of the at-home stuff, but really wanting to use this incredible base of friends and relationships to help build their businesses. And so we saw that coming. We saw that social media kind of has the same network effect as direct selling does, right? It's, who and then who they know, and it just builds really quickly. So at that time, we kind of hit a sweet spot in timing to be able to get people really interested in the opportunity, and it worked really well. So I saw that and I said, this is something that we can take to other companies, and then built a social media firm to help companies kind of manage and, all the creative and really kind of get into the how and why of doing social media. You'll recall there was a lot of product placement, photos, and people trying to sell things and, buy this thing and
the fire hose approach.
Right. Fire hose. And back then, just like now, it was all about, the successful folks who were using social media were doing it the right way, which was connecting with people. Right. Back then, you could sell to people, but eventually you'd get edged out of the algorithm and no one would see what you were doing. It's the same today.
Well, and that was early on, right? That you were seeing that. And I think the thing for me that I think the companies realized at that point is like, eventually the crossover, you made a comparison about like with Facebook, it was all about connecting people, right? I remember when I first got on, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't spoken to that person in 15 years in high school, right? But cool to connect and see. Network marketing is the same. It's about that network, those connections. And so I think you saw early on, this is where eventually this is what the industry will be. And the most successful companies today, that's how they're doing it. And the ones who are most at risk, they're doing it wrong,